Hello and welcome. The hour is late, and the world outside is quiet. Find your comfortable place, settle in, and let the weight of the day simply dissolve. There is nothing to do now, nothing to achieve. You can let your thoughts drift. Let the noise of the modern world fade away until it is just a distant murmur, and then nothing at all. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. There is nothing you need to see. There is only the sound of my voice and the story it will tell tonight. We are not in a hurry. We will travel back, far back, to a time of marble and cold frontiers, a time of great power and great weariness. We will tell the story of a man who ruled the known world, but struggled every day only to rule himself. Tonight, we tell the story of the Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius. Our story begins not with the clash of swords or the roar of a crowd in the Colosseum. It does not begin with the purple robes of an emperor. It begins in the quiet, sun-drenched gardens of a Roman villa on a hillside in Rome. The year is 121 AD. He was born, Marcus Annius Verus, into a family of immense wealth and deep political connections. His lineage was Spanish, but his home was the beating heart of the world. From his earliest days, he was a quiet boy, serious, thoughtful. He was not loud. He did not seek the rough games of other children. He was observant. He was a child who preferred company of his tutors and the weight of a book to the noise of the circus. His grandfather, a man of great importance, a consul, saw this quality in the boy. He called him Verissimus. It was a nickname. It meant the most true one, the most sincere. Even as a child, he felt the gaze of the powerful. The Roman world, at this time, was ruled by the Emperor Hadrian. Hadrian was a restless, intelligent, bearded man, a builder and a traveler. He was constantly in motion, his mind always planning. Hadrian saw this quiet, serious boy, this Verissimus, and in him he saw the future. Hadrian's plan was long and winding, like a river. He did not have a son. The line of succession was a fragile thing, so he chose his heir, a good, respected senator named Antoninus Pius. But Hadrian looked beyond his own death. He made Antoninus in turn adopt two boys. One was Lucius Verus, the son of Hadrian's first, now deceased choice. The other was his quiet, thoughtful child, Marcus. Imagine the feeling to be just a boy, perhaps 17 years old, and to know your life is not your own. To know that a path has been set for you, carved in stone by the most powerful man on earth. That one day, barring some twist of fate, the weight of the entire world, the Imperium Romanum, would fall upon your shoulders. This knowledge, this weight, it did not make him arrogant. It did not make him proud. It drove him inward. While other young men of his class learned the arts of war, and the games of politics, Marcus learned the art of the mind. His education became his world. His new father, Antoninus, spared no expense. Marcus was given the greatest tutors of his generation. We can almost smell the dust from the thousands of scrolls in his tutors' libraries, the dry, papery scent of old parchment, the faint, metallic temps of iron gall ink. We can hear the soft sound of a reed pen scratching across the page. He was taught rhetoric, the art of public speaking, by the most famous orator of his day. Frontofor loved him dearly. Their letters survive. We can read them even now. The quiet correspondence between a teacher and his student. They are not just lessons about grammar and law. They are letters of deep friendship. They speak of melancholy, of headaches, of the small aches and pains of daily life. But the art of persuasion, the art of words, it felt hollow to Marcus, who was searching for something else, something quieter, something true. He found it in philosophy. He was drawn to the teachings of the Stoics, a philosophy that was old and simple and hard. He read the words of Epictetus, a man who had been born a slave. The Stoics taught that you cannot control the world outside of you. You cannot control other people. You cannot control sickness or war or death. You cannot control if men betray you or if the gods send a plague. You can only control one thing, your own mind, your own response, your own judgment. This was the fortress he began to build, not of stone or of legions, but of thought. He learned to look at the world with a cold, steady gaze, to see things precisely as they were. A fine meal was just the dead body of a fish or a bird. A purple robe was just sheep's wool, dyed with the blood of a shellfish. This was not pessimism. It was perspective, a way to strip the world of its frightening or distracting illusions. He would have been happy to live his life as a quiet scholar, a philosopher, reading his books, walking in his garden, talking with his friends. He had no taste for power, but the path was set. For 23 years, he lived under the peaceful, quiet reign of his adoptive father, Antoninus Pius. He was a good son. He was patient. He waited. He learned, and in the year 161 AD, his father, the good, gentle emperor, Antoninus Pius, died. On his deathbed, his last word was equanimity, a balanced mind. And then the weight finally settled. The purple robe, the symbol of supreme power, must have felt so very heavy on his shoulders. The Senate offered the entire world to Marcus, and in his very first act, he showed the kind of man he was. He refused to rule alone. He insisted that his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, be made. For the first time in its history, Rome had two rulers. Perhaps he did not want the power. Perhaps he simply did not want to bear the burden alone. The two men were opposites. Marcus was the philosopher, quiet, somber, and dutiful. Lucius was the soldier, younger, stronger, more handsome, and drawn to the pleasures of the city. He loved the games and the banquets. Marcus simply endured them, but he treated his new partner with patience and respect. The peace did not last. The long, quiet summer of Antoninus's reign was over. Trouble stirred in the far dusty lands of the east. The Parthian Empire, a rival to Rome's power. The kingdoms of the East were in turmoil. A war was brewing. Lucius Verus, the younger, stronger, more martial emperor, went to lead the legions. It was his duty. Marcus stayed in Rome. His battle was different. It was a war of parchment and numbers and law. He managed the grain supply. He managed the law courts. He sat in the Senate. He performed the endless, grinding, quiet administration of a world. The war in the East was a distant sound, a rumor carried on ships, a report read by candlelight. For 4 years, the legions fought. Marcus ruled. He was a good ruler, fair and just. He listened to the people. He respected the Senate. He would sit for days, listening to court cases, patiently weighing the evidence. He did not rush. He was steady. And then, in the year 166 AD, the war was won. The Parthians were defeated. Lucius Verus, his brother, returned to Rome, a hero. The city celebrated a great triumph, a parade of victory. But the returning legions brought something with them, something invisible, silent, and terrible, a shadow that had followed them all the way from the east. We call it the Antonine Plague. It was, most likely, smallpox, and it hollowed out the Roman world. The air in the capital grew thick, thick with the smell of smoke from endless funeral pyres, the sound of mourning, a low, constant hum in the narrow, cobbled streets. The city's granaries were full, but the bakers were dead. The legions were strong, but the soldiers were dying in their beds. This was a war. The Stoic emperor could not fight. There was no enemy to charge, no fortress to besiege, only this slow, creeping, invisible decay. Marcus did not flee. He stayed in Rome. He performed the ancient rituals. He tried to calm the people. He sold his own imperial property, his golden plates, his statues, his silks. He sold them to pay for the grain, to bury the dead. He faced the plague, as his philosophy had taught him, with equanimity. He endured. The plague weakened the empire. It emptied the farms. It thinned the legions on the borders. It left a wound. And from the north, across the great river Danube, came a new sound. A sound, example, from beyond the known world, from the dark, cold, ancient forests of Germania. The tribes, the Marcomanni, the Quadi, they had lived in the shadows for centuries. Now they saw a weakened Rome, and they crossed the rivers in a great, hungry wave. The peace was shattered. The philosopher, who loved his books and his quiet gardens, now had to become a general. Now he had to go to war for almost all of the rest of his life. Marcus Aurelius would not see Rome. He would not see his warm villas or his libraries. He would see the frontier. We can imagine him at his command post at Carnunum, on the bank of the river Danube. He is in a damp, cold, military tent. The air smells of wet wool and wood smoke and damp earth. Outside is the endless, dark forest. The sound is the dripping of icy rain on the leather tent roof. the distant shout of a sentry walking the timber wall, the stamping of horses in the cold mud. This was his life, for years and years, endless, grinding, weary warfare. This was not a war of grand, heroic charges. There were no trumpets, no glorious cavalry. It was a war of skirmishes, of ambushes, in the dark woods, of raids across a frozen river. It was a war of logistics, of moving grain and leather and iron in slow, heavy carts through the mud. The men were tired. The legions were thin from the plague. The emperor was tired. He was often ill. A cold settled deep in his chest, a weariness in his bones. The war just dragged on. A slow, grey, somber duty. His co-emperor, Lucius Verus, the man who loved pleasure, had died. The plague had taken him. Now Marcus was truly alone, the sole ruler of a world at war. And it was here, in the cold, in the damp, in the weariness, in the quiet, shaking hours. Before a dawn he was not sure he would see, that he did his most famous work. He would light a single, flickering oil lamp. The light was small against the vast German darkness. He would pull his coarse woolen cloak tighter around his shoulders. He would open a simple, leather-bound journal, and he would write. He did not write for us. He did not write for publication or for history. He wrote for himself, a private conversation with his own mind. He did not write in Latin, the language of command and law. He wrote in Greek, the language of philosophy and art. We call these writings the Meditations, but he called them simply to myself. They are not a book of answers. They are a book of questions, of reminders, of spiritual exercises. In the silence of the tent, surrounded by the threat of violence, he would write to himself. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ... ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He was not complaining. He was preparing his mind for the day, reminding himself that he could not control them. He could only control his own response. The universe is change. He wrote, our life is what our thoughts make it. He wrote about the passage of time, how Alexander the Great and his mule driver were made equal in death. Both returned to dust. He wrote about pain. If you are distressed by anything external, he wrote, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This was his fortress. The tent was cold. The ground was hard. His body was weak. But in his mind, he tried to build a place of stillness, of equanimity. The years passed on the frontier. They bled into one another, like watercolors in the rain. One season of mud, fading into a season of ice, fading back into a season of mud. The war was almost won. He had pushed the tribes back, across the Danube. He had established a grim, quiet order. He was planning to create new provinces, to finally end the threat, to build a lasting peace. so that he could, at last, go home. And then, in the year 175 AD, news came. News from the warm, bright east, the other side of the world. It was not news of a victory, it was a rupture, a revolt. His most trusted general, Avidius Cassius, the man who had won the Parthian War for him, the governor of Syria, a man he respected, a man he, perhaps, even loved. Avidius Cassius had declared himself emperor. The news had spread across the east that Marcus was dead. A false rumor, either by accident or by design. And Cassius had seized his chance. This was the ultimate betrayal. It could have broken him. It could have filled him with rage. The empire was now split in two. A civil war was inevitable. Another war added to the war he was already fighting. But his journal, his private thoughts, show his resolve. He spoke to his soldiers, the men who were tired and loyal. He did not rage. Against Cassius, he felt pity, pity for the man who had broken his own honor, pity for the man who had let ambition poison his mind. He told his men that he hoped Cassius would not be killed or take his own life. He hoped so that he, Marcus, could have the chance to forgive him, to show the world how a philosopher deals with betrayal. He gathered the legions. He prepared for the long, slow march to the east to fight his own general, but the revolt faded as quickly as it had begun. When the news arrived in Syria that Marcus was not dead, but was, in fact, marching against them, the conspiracy collapsed. Avidius Cassius was killed by his own men. A centurion struck him down. His head was sent to Marcus, a grim trophy of a broken friendship. Marcus refused to see it. He would not look upon the face of his betrayer. He ordered it to be buried with honor. The emperor was tired, but his duty was not finished. He had to travel east. He had to restore order, to heal the wound left by the revolt. He took his wife, the Empress Faustina, with him. She had been with him for so many years, even in the cold camps on the Danube. And on this long, final journey, in a small village in Cappadocia, Faustina died. More loss, more grief. The world just kept taking. He mourned her, quietly. He had her deified, made into a goddess. He founded a town in her name, and he continued his journey, having endured. He traveled through Syria. Through Egypt he saw Alexandria. He saw the great pyramids, ancient, even to him. He did not punish the cities that had supported Cassius. He forgave them. He visited Athens, the home of his philosophy. He walked where Socrates and Plato had walked. Perhaps, for a few short days, he felt a moment of peace. He returned to Rome for a short time. In 176 AD, the city celebrated him. A triumph, but he could not rest. His mind was always on the frontier. The war in the north was not finished. The peace was not secure. The quiet would not hold. So in the year 178 AD, the old, tired emperor left the warmth and comfort of Rome for the last time. He returned back to the cold, back to the damp, to the fog, back to the tent. On the banks of the Danube, he was an old man now, in his late 50s. His body was worn out. The long marches, the cold winters, the endless administration had taken their toll. He was dying. In the year 180 AD, in the Roman city of Vindobona, what we now call Vienna, the emperor grew weak. He knew the end was near. He had done his duty. He had held the line. He had endured. He had tried to be a good man in a world that was hard. For his last few days, he stopped eating, stopped drinking. He gathered his friends. He simply prepared. He faced his own death as he had faced everything else. With calm, with rationality, with equanimity, he passed his power to his son, Commodus, his one great and tragic mistake. And then, on the 17th of March, 180 AD, surrounded by the sounds of the camp, far from his home, he let go. The philosopher who had lived in a world of war was finally at rest. His body was returned to Rome. The ashes of the emperor were placed in the grand mausoleum of Hadrian. The people wept. They mourned him, not as a god, but as a father, the father of their country. But his true self was not in the ashes, in the cold marble tomb. It remained in that small, stained, leather-bound journal, the one he kept by his bedside, in the dark forests of the north. A quiet voice, in the dark, speaking across 2,000 years, reminding himself how to live and how to die. And so our story comes to a close. The great column of Marcus Aurelius still stands. In Rome, carved in stone, are the images of his wars. In the north, soldiers and horses and distant, forgotten battles, a monument to his duty. But this is not his true legacy. His legacy is not in the stone. It is in the words, the private thoughts of a man who lived almost 2,000 years ago. A man who felt as we feel. He felt tired. He felt frustrated. He felt the cold, and in the darkness, he searched for his inner light, a fortress within himself. History is not just dates and empires. It is the quiet human heart beating against the endless passage of time. A river that flows on and on. And now our story is over. The past fades into silence. There is only the quiet of this room. There is only the gentle rise and fall of your own breath. There is nothing to do, nowhere to be, just rest. The night is deep, and all is well. Sleep, sleep, example, peaceful rest.